Hunter Junwoo Kim stands surrounded by a crowd of reporters who shove cameras and microphones in his face, shouting questions about him becoming the world's first SSS-Ranked hunter. Soyeon and her group stand with their backs to the viewer, surrounded by a crowd of reporters thrusting microphones and smartphones towards a bright light. They reflect that it was the first operation they have had in a while. Junwoo looks to the side, thinking that even though he didn't talk about it, reporters had already swarmed the dungeon. A crowd of agitated reporters shoves microphones forward, shouting questions about 16 hunters, a recently appeared Blue Gate, and a major scandal. Junwoo looks downcast and apologizes, stating he wants to focus on the conquest for now. Junwoo stands before a crowd of anxious reporters who push microphones towards him, his face tense as he realizes they anticipated his response. Junwoo's jaw is illuminated from below, the corner of his mouth lifting into a subtle smirk as he decides to give them a special performance. Soyeon and Junwoo stand with their group as a bright light flashes from a grid-like structure behind them, enveloping them completely. Junwoo stares forward with a determined expression, her eyes glowing blue as a light blue aura emanates from her. A man in a long coat leads a group of people out of a venue as media and observers record their departure. Soyeon stands in the crowd, watching the man leave while a person nearby shouts their admiration. Hunter Kim's relief is cut short as reporters suddenly swarm him, demanding a statement about the cleaning team assault incident and telling him to freeze. He stops, his face becoming tense and surprised by the sudden confrontation. Junwoo watches from the crowd as a serious man speaks to the reporters holding microphones. Soyeon stands over the bleeding man she hurled into the wall, her eyes glowing red as she looks down at the blood splattered behind him. Junwoo stares in disbelief, his eyes wide and sweat breaking out on his face. Man smirks amidst a crowd while confronting someone, telling them he knows they want to pretend a violent incident never happened, and revealing that he personally knows the man they beat up. Man grins widely with his eyes cast in shadow, delivering a confident taunt. Man's face twists into a wide, sinister grin, his eyes narrowing with intense irritation as he furiously questions how his opponent avoided making the headlines. A crowd gathers and whispers, pointing toward Junwoo in the background as reporters shout accusations that he assaulted a civilian. They demand to know if the incident was recorded while Junwoo stands silently amidst the growing scandal. Junwoo's eyes are wide and tense, his brow furrowed in a strong reaction. Soyeon and Junwoo walk through a crowd gathered on snowy ground beside railway tracks, where reporters with cameras watch them pass. Soyeon speaks about a disturbing rumor as they move forward. Soyeon enthusiastically cheers for Junwoo, calling him the world's greatest hunter as he walks away, his body glowing among other silhouetted figures. Soyeon grits her teeth, a reddish aura flaring around her body while the surrounding people watch with tense and concerned expressions. The modern glass headquarters of the Korea Association of Supernatural Ability Management, also known as the Association, was established to protect the country and its citizens from dungeons and deadly monsters. A multi-headed monster with glowing red eyes and sharp fangs roars over the group as Soyeon screams in terror and Junwoo attempts to flee. The association gathered individuals with supernatural abilities and formed 4 teams, with men in suits sitting at a conference table as a screen behind them displays 2 monstrous figures with glowing red eyes. A hunter plants a heavy boot on the bloodied, defeated body of a figure lying on the ground. Junwoo stands confidently in dark tactical gear, his expression serious amidst a dusty, post-combat environment with a fellow soldier visible behind him. Junwoo stands determined with minor facial injuries, surrounded by dust and debris under an overcast sky. A system message declares that the leader of that team now faces his next opponent. Junwoo holds his smartphone, which displays a news article headlined, "Controversy over World's Greatest Hunter Assaulting Civilian," next to a picture of an intense-looking young man. Soyeon grips his smartphone, trembling in anger as he reads the flood of news articles and comments detailing the controversy surrounding Junwoo Kim. Junwoo holds his smartphone with a troubled expression as a woman questions him. She asks what is wrong, stating the conquest was a success and reminding him he was told to prevent any information from leaking. Junwoo shouts at the woman driving the car, holding up his phone. He yells that he did what he was told, questioning how word got out when it is now all over the internet. The driver listens with a serious and defensive expression. A black car speeds down a dark highway past other vehicles, its headlights cutting through the night. Soyeon glares, her green eye wide with disbelief as she shouts her denial. Thud grins and states he is the son of Guntae Park, the cleaning team leader, as Junwoo and the woman look on with shocked expressions. Soyeon hunches over in distress, covering his face with one hand. Soyeon stares downward with a subtle, downcast expression. Soyeon's eyes glow red as a strong red aura surrounds him, and he clenches his teeth in a furious expression while making a forceful gesture with his hand, declaring he will eliminate whatever comes in his way. Soyeon drives a car down the highway at night with Emma beside him, shouting that his career is on the line if the situation spirals out of control. A woman watches Junu's determined expression in a reflection as he states that he will work on it. Soyeon sits in a vehicle, turning his head away with a frustrated expression. He states it feels like talking to a machine, sighs, and then asks what the chairman said. Junu and Emma sit in the front seats of a car, discussing the situation. Emma suggests waiting since the person is busy with an offer from the International Association, but Junu calls it ridiculous, believing it's an excuse and worries she might get fired. Soyeon, grim-faced and wearing an eye patch, speaks with intense resolve, stating he will not let him get away with his actions while Junu quietly observes him from the background. Junu sits in the car with his arms crossed as the woman next to him asks if he is some kind of IC robot. Junu looks off-panel with a serious expression, listening as he is told. His rank remains unchanged and his offer will not be revoked, though the message ends with a clear warning. Soyeon's hand clenches into a tight fist as she remembers the rage she felt after reading the article. Soyeon screams and punches the wall in fury as a subordinate grabs him to hold him back. His members watch on and successfully stop him from going after the reporter who was revealed to be the son. Soyeon clenches his fist, cracking the surface underneath as debris splatters from the pressure. Junu walks down a red carpet as uniformed guards salute him and a massive crowd cheers wildly. Confetti rains down as the people chant his name, calling him their savior and the world's best. They celebrate his titles as Korea's youngest hunter, the first S-rank, and the world's first SSS-Rank, acknowledging he is #1 in the world with an offer from the International Hunter Association. Soyeon grinds his teeth in a grimace of pure rage, his eyes glowing a furious red as he thinks about his life's work being wasted in an instant. Soyeon grits her teeth and clenches her jaw in pain as blood drips from her mouth. A furious question echoes in the darkness, demanding to know who dares to stand in the way. Junu glances to the side from inside a vehicle, his expression serious and confused by the question. Soyeon turns to Junu in the car, insisting the man grabbed her collar first and demanding to know his motive. 5 members of the cleaning team stand together in their uniforms with serious expressions, one of them holding a mop. Junu stares forward from inside a car, dismissing the topic by claiming he doesn't even remember. A dark car drives down a highway at night, flanked by large trucks, as the driver inside vows to take care of a man named Gunte, but struggles to recall his exact name. Junu sits in his car at night with a determined expression, ordering someone to bring him Gunte Park and stating he needs to settle things with the bastard before the situation gets out of hand. A voice from the vehicle shouts, "Got it, sir," as it speeds away. Junu sits in the passenger seat of a car, clicking his tongue in annoyance because people will not leave him in peace. Junu's eyes snap wide in shock. Soyeon and Emma are in their vehicle as the blinding headlights of a large truck rush directly towards them. A voice inside screams for them to watch out. Junu and the woman beside him stare with wide eyes, their mouths open in shock and alarm. A large truck brakes hard, its blinding headlights illuminating a smaller car directly in front of it on a dark road. Soyeon stretches out his hand, unleashing a burst of blue energy as system notifications announce he has obtained and activated the skill, Time Control. A wave of blue energy and glowing letters spreads across the road, consuming a black car and a white truck. Soyeon looks aside with a tense expression, sweat beading on his skin as he realizes he was a second away from being covered in blood by the truck. Several large dump trucks suddenly appear on the dark, wet highway, blocking the lanes under a harsh sky. Emma looks down, her body trembling as she stammers that she does not know. A dark car jerks to a halt on the street. Junu stands in the road with his car behind him, extending one arm forward to confront an unseen person. A heavy boot presses down firmly, shattering the ground beneath it. Soyeon radiates a bright burst of energy, forcefully propelling large metallic objects away from her. Junu clenches his jaw and throws a punch that snaps on impact. Junu grits his teeth in frustration, his body completely immobilized as he realizes he is caught in a trap for extraordinaries. Soyeon stands on a dark road, looking intensely to the side as the bright headlights of a vehicle behind him cast a strong glare. Junu turns his head with a pained expression, illuminated by a sudden bright flash from below. Soyeon's hand clenches into a tight fist as she screams in frustration, unable to do anything. Soyeon reels backwards from a powerful impact, his face contorting in pain as debris explodes around him. Soyeon screams in agony, his eyes glowing red as he bares his teeth and blood drips from his mouth. Soyeon is crushed between 2 large vehicles, the violent impact forcing a spray of dark fluid from his mouth. Everything flashes white. Soyeon stands as a silhouette at the epicenter of a violent red explosion, radiating destructive force outward. An explosion erupts on the street, engulfing a vehicle and sending debris flying. a fiery explosion erupts, sending embers flying through the air. Soyeon staggers and collapses, her silhouette framed by a large building engulfed in flames behind her. Soyeon stands as a silhouette against a wall of intense fire and smoke, remarking to himself that it is a crappy day. Junwoo's eyes glow red and he grins, black fluid dripping down his face as flames rise behind him. Heavily armed tactical soldiers aim their rifles forward, some crouching behind shields as the command to open fire is given. Soyeon walks forward as multiple machine guns open fire, with explosions detonating around him and bullets striking the ground at his feet, yet he continues his advance without pausing. Soyeon bleeds from a severe injury, the dark liquid covering her forehead and eye. She realizes the attack was a thoroughly planned ambush. Junwoo stands triumphantly over the defeated monsters, wielding glowing energy weapons as they cower before him. He knows a regular hunter would have been killed instantly without a chance to resist. Soyeon stands defiantly as energy glows around his legs, facing a massive horned demon king and its surrounding horde of red-eyed monsters. The creatures growl at him, but he remains steadfast, remembering that he has survived over 1,000 battles in dungeons. Soyeon screams in agony as blood drips from his eye. Soyeon reveals her true form, a shadowy monster with bared fangs, lunging forward in a dynamic pose against a streak of red and white light. Soyeon lunges forward as a shadowy fanged beast with glowing eyes, repeating to herself that the incoming attack will not kill her. Soyeon kneels triumphantly among the defeated shadowy figures, wielding 2 glowing blue energy swords and muttering, "That's what he thought." Soyeon kneels on the ground, severely injured with blood on his face and chest, surrounded by a group of armed tactical soldiers. Black liquid drips down the back of Soyeon's neck from a metallic object that clicks beside her head. A masked figure in tactical gear aims a brightly glowing weapon at the blood-splattered Soyeon, who stares down the blue-ironed muzzle of the superpower suppressor, Titan. Soyeon's face is marred by black liquid, his eyes glowing intensely as a powerful light emanates from above his head. A silhouetted figure in military gear fires a weapon, striking another individual with a bright, glowing impact. A system scan appears over Soyeon's face, detecting critical damage to her lungs, heart, liver, and brain. The scan confirms cardiac arrest and begins calculating her chances of revival. Soyeon lies motionless on the ground, covered in blood, as a system interface materializes above her body, displaying a flatlining heartbeat and confirming her death. A massive splash erupts violently from the water beneath the industrial bridge, sending sparkling particles into the air. Soyeon freefalls through a luminous blue space, tumbling past floating dark debris and glowing square constructs. Soyeon looks at a system interface where a dark marked hand reaches toward a bright light as a message declares, "By your death." Soyeon floats amidst a torrent of blue light and digital particles as a system window announces he has successfully unlocked the hidden skill, Karma. A bright blue system window flashes, revealing the newly unlocked hidden skill, Karma, was acquired through an achievement. A system message informs him that he has been sent back 10 years, and that his post-revival career is determined by the karma of his former life. Soyeon pants heavily as a decaying, monstrous hand clutches her arm, and a holographic interface appears before her with the message, assigning career. Soyeon stands over the defeated creature's body as a blue digital interface materializes in front of her, displaying the message, career assigned. Soyeon endures immense strain, his body trembling as he stands in the flooded stone corridor and looks towards a bright exit. Soyeon shouts urgent commands at the cleanup crew as they clear monster corpses and debris, ordering Junwoo to collect the bodies faster. Junwoo sweats and looks up in distress as a notification assigns him to the dungeon cleaning team under supernatural ability management. He pants and curses, feeling like the ordeal is killing him. A figure in tactical gear points a superpower suppressor at Soyeon, engulfing her in a blinding light. Soyeon hunches over as the device completely seals her skills, leaving her powerless. She questions who her attacker is, fearing she is going to die. Junwoo reels back from a sudden impact, liquid streaking down his face as an overhead light illuminates him. Junwoo screams in distress, his eyes wide with panic and sweat dripping down his face. Junwoo jolts awake in bed, looking troubled and frustrated from a bad dream. Soyeon stirs awake and clutches her clothes, her body feeling sore as she wonders how long she was asleep. Soyeon stares with wide, startled eyes, his brows furrowed in confusion. Soyeon stands disoriented in a cluttered room, questioning where he is as a buzzing sound fills the space. Soyeon observes 2 large, tied-up sacks inside a confined, grimy flat, recognizing it is not her home. Soyeon looks at a dirty toilet in a small room with a serious expression. She thinks the space is smaller than her own bathroom and dismisses the possibility of it being Ms. Lee's house or her own, certain the owner would never let her inside. Junwoo peers out from behind a doorway, his shocked expression scanning the unfamiliar room as he questions where he is. Junwoo stares forward, his eyes widening in shock and his brow furrowing. A system notification confirms his death, announcing that the event has successfully unlocked the hidden skill, Karma. Soyeon reels backward from a powerful impact, her body frozen in shock. Junwoo hears the DEAth confirmed announcement and scowls in disbelief, calling it bullshit. Junwoo looks into a mirror, where his reflection stares back in shock, its eyes wide and mouth agape as a bright light surrounds it. A thought states that this is him from 10 years ago. Junwoo looks to the side, his expression frozen in complete shock at the mention of his 28-year-old self. Soyeon stutters the command to open the system, a bead of sweat on her temple. Junwoo stares in shock as a bright blue energy field erupts around him, a system window appearing to announce his hidden skill, Karma. A notification reveals the hidden skill, Karma, was unlocked by death, sending him back 10 years and stating the skill cannot be deactivated. Soyeon sits in the bathroom and reads the holographic system window before him. The window reveals his hidden skill, Karma, which was unlocked by death. He learns the skill sent him back 10 years and cannot be deactivated, confirming his experience was not a dream. Junwoo forces a manic smile, his eyes wide as a bead of sweat rolls down his face. He begins to laugh, realizing he is dead. A system notification states that the skill cannot be deactivated, and another message announces he has been assigned to a new career with his new skill. Soyeon grits his teeth in pain, sweat dripping down his brow as a faint blue glow surrounds his head. Junwoo stands over a pile of defeated monster corpses, his face solemn and scarred as blue electrical energy emanates from his hand. Junwoo reads the blue system window floating before him, his new career listed as dungeon cleaner. He sees the condition to deactivate his karma. He must become the Secretary General of the International Superpower Association within 5 years. The window states success will return him to the moment before his death, while failure means he will perish completely. He watches the timer tick down with just under 5 years remaining and swallows hard. Soyeon reads the condition to deactivate karma, which requires her to become the Secretary General of the International Superpower Association within 5 years, and she internally questions the impossible demand. Soyeon hunches over in the bathroom, her mind reeling from the realization that if she fails the mission, she will rot away there for the rest of her life. A tall, modern building with reflective windows serves as the headquarters for the International Superpower Association. Soyeon stands backed by a colossal shadow and surrounded by masked, armored figures, representing a global organization in control of all worldwide associations where its Secretary General holds more authority than the US President, making it the most powerful position in the world. Junwoo contemplates the monumental task of becoming the world's first SSS-Ranked hunter, realizing he must achieve this goal in only 5 years, a feat he believes is currently out of his league. Soyeon's hand clenches, tightly gripping the fabric of his pants. He apologizes and says he cannot do it, explaining that it is simply impossible for him. Junwoo dismissively taps the glowing blue holographic interface with a serious expression. Junwoo's expression shows thoughtful determination as he realizes he can only be brought back to life by becoming the Secretary General, concluding that becoming a hunter is his best chance, and that he will reach SSS rank quickly with his skills. A system window displays 5 locked skills: possessed skill Demon Lord, acquired skill Omnipotence, acquired skill Limit Breaker, acquired skill Fallen Angel, and acquired skill Yearbook. Soyeon grits her teeth into a wide, defiant grin, realizing all her hunter skills are locked and cursing the karma. Soyeon stands before a large, glowing blue system message that suddenly appears, congratulating him on acquiring a new skill. Junwoo grins widely, his expression a mixture of triumph and relief. A system notification announces a newly unlocked passive skill, OCD, with the effect Geek Cleaning, Yumorin. Junwoo clenches his teeth, his eyes turning blank white as his face contorts in a furious, strained expression. The television screen shatters inside a simple room containing a bed, a desk, and a coffee table. The title, The Dungeon Cleaning Life of a Once Genius Hunters, is presented, crediting the original story to Dollbeat and the art to Goyle Goyle. Junwoo lies on his bed in a messy room, staring up with a weary expression as he thinks about his death and returned to 10 years in the past, where he woke up as a dungeon cleaner instead of an SSS rank hunter. All his hunter skills were locked, including his possessed skill Demon Lord and his acquired skills Omnipotence, Limit Breaker, Fallen Angel, and Yearbook. His achievements had vanished into thin air. Junwoo lies in bed with a distraught expression, wondering what to do next and sighing as he questions if he really needs to take the cleaning job. Soyeon squeezes his eyes shut, internally screaming in refusal while worrying about his dignity as an SSS ranker, convinced that accepting would be the death of him. He recalls the soldiers in full tactical gear who killed him, remembering them as a well-trained group and resolving to discover their identities. Soyeon, Junwoo, and Emma stand in a misty landscape with their guild flag, their past as a potential civilian guild being questioned. Soyeon questions if the man with the glowing sword and his two companions in dark coats were sent by the association. A smartphone vibrates, its screen lighting up to display a call from No Caller ID. Junwoo answers the call from the unknown number, holding the white smartphone to his ear as his boss, Park, speaks. Soyeon holds the phone to his ear with a confused expression, questioning if he ever had a boss named Park. Soyeon holds the phone to his ear with a wide, mocking grin, stating that it has been an hour since the other person was supposed to arrive. He laughs and asks if they are not feeling well, adding that the last dungeon was quite tough. Junwoo holds a phone to his ear, his face filled with shock as he learns his karma has assigned him to be a dungeon cleaner. Junwoo stands outside with two companions, laughing boisterously into his smartphone while mocking the person on the other end for being a wuss. Two men confront their boss outside, yelling at him about people leaving the job. They shout at him to stop and say he should let them know if he can't handle the work, but he keeps his back turned while on the phone. Soyeon holds her phone and overhears the cleaners call her useless while urging their boss to leave. She then internally questions why they are looking down on her, admitting to herself that she looks like crap. Junwoo holds a smartphone to his ear, clenching his jaw in deep frustration as a tense red aura surrounds him. Junwoo angrily shouts into a phone to defend someone while Soyeon and Emma observe with serious expressions. Junwoo holds the phone to his ear, listening as he is told to take it easy but to give a heads up next time. Soyeon holds his smartphone with a startled expression, confused after an off-panel character named Guntae Park gives him a number. He stares and asks for the man's name again. A man with a wide grin introduces himself as Guntae Park, while Soyeon's green eye stares. Soyeon speaks into his phone with a confident smile, but his expression shifts to surprise after hearing the unexpected response. Soyeon stands in the doorway with his back turned, repeating into his phone that he is coming in as he steps forward. A large bus pulls away from the curb and drives down the city street. Junwoo stands outside with a frustrated expression, thinking about his shock over having no wearable clothes and no Bentley waiting for him. Junwoo sits on a bus, fuming internally after he couldn't find a single penny in his wallet for a cab and feels humiliated by the experience. Junwoo thinks about his past life, realizing he never could have imagined this outcome. He understands this means all his relationships must have changed. He concludes that in this realm he never assaulted Guntae Park, his face set with resolve at the thought. Junwoo's eyes narrow with intense focus, his brow furrowing as he considers the possibility that Guntae Park was responsible for his death. Junwoo stands on the road in a long coat, his expression serious as he demands an explanation for his death and the planned accident that was meant to stop him. Soyeon clenches his fist, his face strained as he fights against the anti-superpower device preventing him from using his skills. The hooded Soyeon aims a glowing gun, a superpower suppressor specifically designed for torching monsters. An advanced weapon with metallic and blue components is identified as the Titan. The weapon is a firearm of the highest class, possessing substantial technology and an enormous price tag. Soyeon smirks, deducing that a dungeon cleaner like Guntae Park was incapable of handling the task and must have hired a professional due to his grudge against him. Soyeon grins maniacally with wide, dark eyes, his expression turning sinister as he reveals the son also held a deep resentment against him. Junwoo sits on public transport with his arms crossed, annoyed that a simple nudge was considered an assault. Soyeon's green eye glares with cold intensity as he states the other person should have listened when he was being nice. The man looks up with a distressed and pleading expression, begging for it to be taken back. Junwoo questions a man standing before him who identifies himself as Guntae Park, the cleaning team leader. Junwoo looks aside with a skeptical expression, stating he has never heard that name before and asking what this is about. Soyeon confronts someone with a stern expression, vehemently opposing the suggestion to cut the cleaning team and arguing they are already struggling with a lack of staff. Soyeon and Junwoo stand facing each other in a sunlit corridor during their conversation. Junwoo looks defensive, claiming he only made a suggestion and has no authority over the matter. Soyeon maintains a calm, assertive demeanor while telling him that everyone knows his influence and that the association depends on him, making it easy for him to cut their staff. A man in a dark shirt bows deeply in a brightly lit hallway, pleading for the cutbacks to be reconsidered. Junwoo stares forward with a serious expression, realizing his suggestion on cutbacks has led to a direct confrontation he did not fully expect. Junwoo stares forward, his eye wide in a silent, intense reaction. Junwoo looks to the side with a stern, determined expression, realizing the situation is going to drag on. Soyeon looks to the side and asks if they know it is inefficient for lizards to cut off their tails. Soyeon confronts Junwoo in a bright corridor, questioning why people act without hesitation when they find themselves in danger. Soyeon looks up with wide, distressed eyes as a green lizard detaches its own tail above her. Soyeon stammers an incomplete objection, his back partially turned. Junwoo leans in close to the startled man, questioning his claim of not being the tail and adding that he understands because everyone thinks they are somebody important. Soyeon stares intensely at Junwoo, who turns toward her with a shocked expression and questions her sincerity. A man with stubble turns his head and speaks with an agitated expression, explaining the association's financial crisis and their plan to cut salaries before accusing the others of acting for their own money. Junwoo speaks with a stern expression, declaring the association's priority is to protect citizens from dungeons and monsters, and that it is the mission for hunters like him to carry out. Soyeon turns his back on Junwoo and walks away, leaving him standing alone in the room. Soyeon shouts with a furious expression, gesturing with his hand as he belittles the cleaners and questions their work ethic. Soyeon turns his head to the side with a dismissive scoff, brushing off the conversation about recruiting. Soyeon walks away down a corridor while Junwoo watches from the foreground. Soyeon plants her boot firmly on the ground, reminding them of the association's duty to protect citizens as she commands them to halt. A man collapses to his knees with a thud, his expression filled with distress as he begs Soyeon to reconsider her decision. Soyeon holds a clenched fist while Junwoo looks up at her with a stern, frustrated expression as she calls him bothersome for not understanding her explanation. An unnamed man confronts Junwoo, getting close to his face with a look of contempt. He tells Junwoo that people like him should be thankful and that they just get paid to clean up messes while others fight for their lives. Junwoo stares back at him, his eyes wide with shock and indignation. Soyeon glares with anger and disgust, thinking about how they've made easy money yet keep asking for more, calling them a bunch of parasites. Junwoo aggressively grabs the agitated man by his shirt, his expression stern as he demands the man repeat his words. Soyeon punches a man in a brown jacket, forcing him to recoil from the blow. Junwoo confronts a man from behind, warning him to watch it as liquid trickles down the back of his head. Soyeon leans against the cracked wall, his face bruised and his nose bleeding. He looks down in pain and frustration, shouting that it was just a nudge and telling them to stop overreacting. Junwoo holds a phone to his ear, his face contorted with rage as he yells at Miss Lee to come and handle the parasite, furious that she involved him in the mess. A figure in dark, lace-up boots stands on the asphalt. A glowing portal opens in the middle of a cordoned-off city street. Soyeon and other uniformed personnel stare from behind a barricade. She identifies the gate as a high-risk, yellow-level dungeon. Soyeon identifies the boss as the Foxtrot Centipede, a beast he conquered when he was 28. A man stands before the colossal red monster, his hand glowing with blue energy as the creature faces him with glowing eyes and large fangs. Junwoo stands with a serious expression, realizing he has definitely traveled 10 years back in time. Junwoo freezes as a man in the distance, waves and shouts his name. Junwoo's eyes glow red, his face set in a stern expression. A man with a wide grin laughs and shouts, announcing the arrival of the dungeon cleaner, Guntae Park. The production studio displays its acknowledgements and logo. A man with short brown hair and stubble laughs with his eyes closed, enthusiastically calling out for Junwoo to come over. Soyeon's jawline tenses in the darkness as her gaze locks onto the man who attacked her. Junwoo appears from the darkness, his eyes glowing red as he glares intensely. A middle-aged man in a cheap, worn-out uniform laughs and asks his son if he is all right, and his son remembers him as a typical man, exactly like this. A man smiles broadly and greets Junwoo, who observes him with a wary expression, thinking he doesn't look like someone who would kill. The man asks Junwoo if he has eaten. A man claps Junwoo firmly on the back, shouting to the gathered group that he knew Junwoo would be dependable. Sang-hyuk Han of Cleaning Team 3 scoffs dismissively, thinking the other person only showed up because they were caught trying to leave. Hwajong Lim of Cleaning Team 3 angrily refutes the person's dependability, shouting that he avoided his duties last time by claiming he couldn't handle the work. Soyeon looks at her boss with a concerned expression, questioning why he insists on bringing someone else when she believes the 4 of them are enough. Junwoo gathers his uniformed team and tells them to get down to business, asking Sang-hyuk how much time they have left. Sang-hyuk confirms they have 45 minutes. Ah-young shouts in frustration that they only have 45 minutes, blaming a wuss for putting them an hour behind schedule while Junwoo listens. From below, Emma looks up at them with an exasperated expression. Soyeon orders her group to hurry, warning they will get another earful if they delay. A brown-haired man holds out a gas mask and tells Junwoo to take it, but Junwoo refuses, leaving the man confused. Junwoo holds the complex metallic device and examines it closely, questioning if it is a respirator. Emma questions Junwoo and Soyeon with a stern expression as they stand before a bright light, asking if there is a problem. Junwoo responds that there is not necessarily an issue. Junwoo looks forward with a pensive expression, questioning what dungeon cleaners actually do. A large modern skyscraper houses the Korea Association of Supernatural Ability Management, an organization also known as the Association, which is made up of 4 teams. An organizational chart details the structure of the Korea Association of Supernatural Ability Management, listing the Command and Control Team, the Hunter Support Team, the Strategy and Operation Team, and the Dungeon Cleaning Team. The Command and Control Team sits in an office, monitoring the opening of dungeons on their screens and gathering all relevant information. The Hunter Support Team manufactures weapons and items inside a high-tech facility, where 3 uniformed men observe an ornate sword displayed near large cylindrical tanks to support overall conquests. 3 hunters from the Strategy and Operation Team stand over the bloody remains of a monster inside a dungeon. Soyeon and her team of masked operatives walk through a supported passage while their leader gives orders about disinfecting the area. He tells one member to find the boss's room and instructs Soyeon to check the gas level, an order she acknowledges. The leader states they must hurry because the large boss will take a long time to dismantle. Junwoo stares forward through his gas mask with a focused expression, internally scoffing at the cleaning team he just learned about and questioning why they pretend to be so busy. Soyeon, Emma, and Junwoo trudge through a dimly lit, desolate environment in their work uniforms and masks, with one of them reaching back to adjust a strap on their equipment. A man in a gas mask shouts for Junwoo, asking where he is going and warning him that he'll get into trouble for heading off alone. Junwoo and his companion, wearing respirator masks, stand inside a dim cave. The companion questions if they are heading to the boss's room, and Junwoo confirms they are, telling him to stick close as he leads the way. Soyeon questions the others and points toward the mine shaft entrance, insisting it is the correct way. 2 men in gas masks and work uniforms share a confused look, and one taps the side of his head. Soyeon, wearing a gas mask, tells Junwoo to speak up if he's not up for it, frustratedly stating they don't have time to wait. Junwoo stands in a dark, rocky chamber wearing a respirator and work attire. His expression serious as 2 other figures in respirators observe him from behind, one suggesting to their boss that they ignore him and move on. Junwoo shoves the dungeon map into the other man's chest, demanding he look at it and tell him where the boss's room is. Hunters map out dungeons they conquer, creating detailed layouts of the interior. A hand holds one such map, which has a specific location highlighted by a red target marker. Soyeon stares forward, his intense eyes visible above the gas mask covering his lower face. Junwoo's companion insists the map from the control team is correct. Junwoo declares the map is wrong and points in the proper direction. He scoffs at the control team's incompetence as his companion stands shocked. A man in a gas mask expresses his shock while his boss looks on with a composed, questioning expression. Junwoo turns his head to the side, his respirator on, and states there is no point in asking before he trails off while revealing who carried out the conquest. Soyeon's eyes narrow intensely from behind his gas mask as he questions who was responsible for the attack. Soyeon stands with her back partially turned in the dim light, deciding to forget it as she concludes. No one would believe her anyway. Soyeon, surrounded by her gas mask team in a dark space, orders them to lead the way but suddenly hesitates with a questioning look. Soyeon and her companion watch 2 other figures in protective gear walk down a dark tunnel as her companion asks if she is sick, to which she replies that she is fine. Junwoo, wearing a gas mask, explains to the other man that the time is for the dungeon closing and asks if he has ever heard of it. Junwoo looks away, a sudden thought striking him as he finally understands the situation. Junwoo and 4 serious-looking men stand inside the glowing, disintegrating remnants of the conquered dungeon. Junwoo, wearing a gas mask inside the decaying tunnel, questions why they would clean a dungeon that will perish on its own and then laughs, calling the task nonsense. Soyeon explains through his gas mask that a subjugated dungeon enters a resting phase until a new monster takes over. Soyeon and Junwoo stand with their group in industrial uniforms at the entrance of a dark, shored-up tunnel, with one asking the other how they would feel if a dungeon reopened, already filled with monster carcasses. Soyeon's expression is serious as he dismisses a thought, immediately correcting himself with the knowledge that hunters could lose their way in their conquest. Soyeon stands with a sword amidst the carcasses of defeated creatures as a grim-faced man radiates green energy, explaining that the gas from the bodies is fatal to humans and the risk increases with their number. Soyeon looks to the side, his expression shifting as he comes to a realization and speaks. Soyeon, wearing a gas mask, explains that their job is to make sure the hunters can focus solely on conquest, and tells them to take pride in their work. A masked man in a worker uniform laughs, boasting that hunters wouldn't exist without them, but Junwoo stands amidst the debris and calls it bullshit. Soyeon, Junwoo, and a third individual stand in a dungeon wearing gas masks and work aprons, while one of them explains their job is to clean up monster carcasses and remove any trace of hunters. Junu stares from behind his gray gas mask, thinking that a cleaner rescuing a hunter is something he has never heard of in his life, and he realizes these guys were not just bumming around. Soyeon, Junu, Emma, Ah-hyung, and Yubin stand before a large, ornate wooden door, identifying it from the map as the boss's room. Junu, wearing a gas mask and an apron, carefully pushes open a wooden door. Soyeon stares in shock as a metallic object slides from his hand. Soyeon, Junu, Emma, Ah-hyung, and Yubin stand together in the dark cavern, staring at a crumbling platform in the empty space before them. Junu and his two companions react with shock and concern, their faces a mix of vindication and utter disbelief at the revelation before them. Soyeon and her team stand inside a dark cavern, uncertain of their next move. One member asks their boss for direction while another suggests they leave, believing there's nothing more they can do. Soyeon, Junu, Emma, and Ah-hyung look up from a low vantage point while discussing their remaining time. Soyeon asks how much longer they have, and Junu states there are 22 minutes left. Emma believes that is enough time and asks the others for their opinions. Soyeon and Junu stand with their companion, gas masks hanging around their necks, ready to move forward. Junu looks up in shock, his eyes wide behind his respirator mask as he yells in panicked disbelief. Junu shouts at his team, enthusiastically declaring they have enough time to finish what they started, while Soyeon stands among them with a displeased expression. Junu shouts in panic, explaining they only have 22 minutes left before the dungeon closes, potentially trapping them for up to a year. Soyeon laughs with his eyes closed, finding the idea of being trapped inside the dungeon for an entire year amusing. Junu shouts with a furious and exasperated expression, yelling that they have lost their minds and are risking death for a simple cleaning job. Junu, wearing his respirator mask, looks at the older man with a frustrated expression. He shouts for information he doesn't already know and impatiently tells the others it is time to get going. Junu stands in the dimly lit room, his expression distressed behind his respirator mask. Junu stands partially obscured by another person within the stone dungeon, his expression twisting with frustration. Emma slams Soyeon backwards, her red eyes glowing as she glares with an intense expression. Soyeon stands in a dark space, her back turned away. Soyeon trembles in anguish as he reflects on his 15-year career as a hunter where he never failed a single conquest. He remembers becoming the world's first SSS-Ranked hunter and winning the title of number 1, a dungeon career no one could look down on until his current desperate situation. Soyeon's mouth curls into a contemptuous smirk as she laughs, insulted at the thought of being looked down upon by mere cleaners inside a dungeon. 4 uniformed figures advance through a dark subterranean passage reinforced with wooden beams. One of them spots a small path leading further down and halts the group's movement. Soyeon screams at Junu, his face contorted in fury. Junu stands with his back turned, ignoring the yelling. Soyeon glares with determination, stating the boss's room is 500 meters away and that a shortcut could get them there in 8 minutes, or as little as 5 if they run. Junu, with a respirator on his chest, declares to the group that he is now the leader. He tells them anyone with a complaint is free to leave, causing Soyeon to protest in surprise. Figures in uniforms with respirators scramble and fall as the dark wooden tunnel splinters and collapses around them. Soyeon breathes heavily with his back turned, staring into a dark, ornate archway. Junu and Soyeon stand with 3 other individuals in a dark, dusty space, all wearing work attire with gas masks resting on their chests and showing serious expressions. Junu, Soyeon, and their 2 co-workers stare ahead, their faces showing collective shock and concern. A colossal red boss monster, the Foxtrot Centipede, towers over 10 meters tall within a vast hall. Multiple large swords pierce its segmented body as Junu, Soyeon, and their co-workers stand far below, dwarfed by the creature's immense scale. The man beside Junu stammers with a surprised expression, confirming that Junu was right and they have reached the boss's room. Dozens of spent bullet casings litter the ground, evidence of a recent and brutal firefight. A weapon is lodged deep within the red monster's dented forehead, striking its vital spot directly above the creature's massive jaw. A uniformed man walks past a massive structure with a companion, clears his throat, and commands the dismantling to begin. Junu blocks the panicked man, who yells at him for wasting time. The man accuses Junu of trying to get revenge just as a bright flash cuts him off. A brilliant flash of white light erupts from the side, its energy radiating outwards and cutting off the man's accusation. A colossal red worm-like creature roars, its eyes glowing and teeth bared as the people in the foreground look on in alarm. Junu's eyes widen in disbelief as he stares forward. Soyeon and the other team members stand frozen behind him, their faces filled with shock as they realize the supposedly subjugated creature is still alive. Soyeon's eyes narrow with intense fury, her brow furrowed as she growls. A voice shouts out that they have a problem. Soyeon, Junwoo, Emma, Ahyung, and Yubin stand before a massive, glowing red serpent as it roars, its body impaled by numerous swords. Junwoo glares forward with furrowed brows, a bead of sweat forming on his face. Soyeon realizes she has a problem and no chance of defeating the creature without her skills when a sudden thud interrupts her thought. Junwoo stands sternly with his team, complaining that the strategy and operation team is slacking off and rationalizing that rigor mortis must have been what startled him. The monstrous entity stands with severe injuries, its body riddled with embedded metal fragments and splattered with blood as smoke billows around it. Junwoo holds a crossbow and speaks to the man beside him, warning him that it is his first time seeing a boss monster and telling him to step back. Junwoo leans in close to the shocked man, telling him he froze up and ordering him to step back because he will handle the situation. Junwoo glares with wide, furious eyes, clenching his jaw in disbelief. A stern man calls Junwoo ridiculous and forcefully snatches the knife from his hand. The massive, heavily wounded centipede monster, impaled by numerous swords, confronts the 5 heroes on the bloodstained ground. Soyeon, Emma, Junwoo, Ahyung, and Yubin stand together, facing the creature. Junwoo, wearing a gas mask and work clothes, holds a combat knife in a dusty, ruined area and takes a deliberate step forward, instructing someone to watch and learn how to dismantle properly. A hand pushes a knife against a durable shell, but the blade cannot get through because it only fits into the 3rd, 6th, and 12th points. Junwoo looks down with a grim, focused expression, preparing to chop apart the still wriggling nerves. 3 men in work uniforms stare forward with expressions of shock and concern, standing frozen inside the dim, dusty room with gas masks hanging around their necks. Soyeon, Junwoo, and Emma stand hesitating with their uniformed team in the desolate landscape until Soyeon nervously shouts, demanding they stop watching and get to work. Urgent shouts issue commands to shove the weapon in and push it up, warning not to stab aimlessly or touch the tail, as its poison has killed many hunters. Junwoo and the others express collective alarm, realizing what they have gotten themselves into. Junwoo, splattered with blood, points his knife forward and warns the 2 individuals not to step on the blood covering the floor. He explains it is not poisonous but is extremely sticky, adding that once they step in it, there is no way out. Soyeon, looking dirty and disheveled, asks Junwoo if he showed their target the control team's file to boost his ego. Junwoo denies it. Soyeon stands shocked with blood spattered across his face as he watches Junwoo in the background, who kneels and violently chops at a bloody mass on the floor. He thinks a rookie cleaner could not be so adept and that the file contained no such information. Junwoo looks down with a strained expression, his face covered in sweat and dirt as he questions where the information could have come from. Soyeon stares forward as streaks of energy and debris fly past her eye. Soyeon crouches on a damaged red structure surrounded by fallen swords as a blue system window appears, announcing a new passive skill, OCD, has been unlocked and is now activating. A dagger strikes a hard, dark surface, the blade deflecting from the impact. Multiple figures stand over the dismantled bone structure, announcing that their work is complete. Junwoo, splattered and exhausted, wipes his forehead in relief. Junwoo collapses as blue lightning surrounds him, his face twisted in pain as he questions why he feels satisfied. Soyeon and 2 men, splattered in dark fluid, react to Junwoo's performance off-panel. One man voices his impressed surprise at Junwoo's skill, while the other concedes it was not bad for a rookie. Soyeon looks on with disbelief, arguing that Junwoo did all the work himself. Junwoo stands splattered in black liquid with a gas mask hanging around his neck as 2 men watch him, one calling him a promising cleaner while the other tells a man named Sungyup to tense up. A smartwatch on a person's wrist displays the time as 2032 p.m. Soyeon and her 3 uniformed companions advance through a dark wooden tunnel toward a bright light at the end. Soyeon and Junwoo emerge from a dark tunnel as a masked figure observes them from the foreground, Soyeon's clothes and mask stained with a dark substance. Soyeon looks down at her blood-splattered boot as blood drips onto the ground, questioning if it leaked from a hole in one of the sacks. A masked figure points down at Soyeon's blood-soaked boot, shouting about the mess she made as another yells to their boss that Junwoo is frozen in place. Junwoo lowers his head and closes his eyes, sighing wearily behind the respirator covering his face. A shadowy creature is partially visible, coated in a sticky fluid which is its own blood, a substance so adhesive that it was once impossible for a hunter to escape from. Soyeon activates the skill Hellfire, unleashing a powerful torrent of red and pink energy from his outstretched hand. He believes the skill's immense heat will easily melt his target. Masked figures in protective gear stand silently amidst debris as a system message announces, "Skill failed," and the skill is currently locked. Junwoo stares intently off-panel, his eyes widening behind his gas mask as he fully comprehends his hopeless situation. Junwoo, wearing a gas mask, shouts at Huizhong, demanding the ropes to tie someone up quickly and ordering everyone else to grab on. Junwoo pulls a rope tied around another man in a gas mask and uniform, binding him. Junwoo, Soyeon, and two others strain together, pulling a thick rope as one shouts the command. Soyeon, Yubin, Ahyung, Emma, and Junwoo descend into a dark chasm on a single rope when a sudden force from below yanks the line taut, pulling the bottommost person down. Junwoo, wearing a gas mask and a blood-stained apron, strains against a thick rope and yells in frustration that it won't budge, demanding to know how much time is left. Two pairs of combat boots, splattered with a dark liquid, dig into the wet, gritty ground. Junwoo and Soyeon look alarmed inside their gas masks as a voice orders Junwoo to remove his hazmat suit, but Soyeon protests that the high gas levels make it too dangerous. Soyeon glares forward from behind his gas mask, his voice blaring as he demands to know if everyone would rather get trapped. Junwoo stares in confusion through his respirator mask, wondering why they are willing to stay when he is the one who is stuck. Junwoo, Emma, Ahyung, and Soyeon cling to a single rope, lowering themselves into a dark abyss as they struggle to hold on. One of them hangs at the bottom, questioning why the others refuse to cut them loose, the tail to ensure their own survival. Soyeon screams desperately at Junwoo, calling him a fool and ordering him to take off his hazmat suit and listen to her. Junwoo stands resolute amidst the debris, his expression grim behind his gas mask as he thinks about the foolish morons. Junwoo stands resolute amidst the debris, his expression grim behind his gas mask as he thinks about the morons. Junwoo and another gas-masked figure argue inside a crumbling structure. One yells that those with a chance must live, but Junwoo shouts back that he would rather stay behind. Soyeon turns his head and shouts an urgent order for everyone to get out now. Soyeon stares forward with intense eyes, her lower face obscured by a mask. Junwoo wears a gas mask and looks to the side while another figure in work clothes stands with their back turned, shouting that 10 seconds remain. The countdown timer shows 4 as Soyeon struggles forward with heavy steps before collapsing to the ground. Junwoo grabs another gas-masked figure by the shirt, locked in a struggle as the number 9s glows above them. Junwoo holds the gas-masked man by his collar as a glowing digital 8 appears behind them. Junwoo supports Soyeon as they run through the damaged environment, both wearing gas masks under a glowing blue digital 7s. A heavily armored leg stands beneath a glowing digital number 6. A glowing digital number 5 appears in the foreground as 3 figures stand with their backs turned, looking toward an intense light at the end of a corridor. Junwoo and 2 others stare in shock and distress as a glowing digital 4 is above them. Junwoo and the man beside him stand with determined expressions in their gas masks as a glowing 3 appears overhead. Soyeon reaches her hand toward a blinding energy source emanating from a cavern opening, a glowing digital 2 displayed above the light. Soyeon stares forward, her eye glowing a brilliant gold as blue geometric interface elements appear in her vision. A large, glowing blue 0 materializes on a white background as a thin black line extends towards it from the left. A brilliant flash of light erupts upwards from the ground between 2 grand pillars, illuminating the hazy, gold-toned landscape. Junwoo stares in shock alongside a man and a woman who look equally distressed. Yubin lies collapsed on the ground, completely spent. Junwoo hunches over, panting heavily while Soyeon, Emma, and Ahyung turn and slowly walk away from the scene. Soyeon and Junwoo look down at their boss with wide, tear-filled smiles of joy, calling out his title. Soyeon grimaces with effort, panting as sweat drips down his face. Junwoo leans against a surface, sweating and panting heavily for breath as he processes almost losing his life. Junwoo stares in confused alarm, his eyes wide as he questions the task of cleaning monster carcasses in an empty dungeon. Details of the scene are not visible due to a data error. Junwoo smiles broadly and speaks cheerfully while Soyeon turns away from him with a frustrated expression. Junwoo stares in shocked disbelief, demanding to know what is meant by a cleanup task when they have only just started. Soyeon grins smugly and extends his open hand forward as a burst of energy emanates from him, and he asks how many more there are. Junwoo's eyes widen and his mouth hangs open in pure shock as a purple glow illuminates him from behind. Junwoo stands before an organizational chart for the Korea Association of Supernatural Ability Management, which details its various departments including the Command and Control Team and Hunter Support Team. The data indicates there are 96 strategy and operation teams across Korea, with a national total of 11,300 registered hunters. A man in an apron leads 3 silhouetted figures under a blue interface labeled Dungeon Cleaning Team. There are only 5 such teams in the nation, making a total of 25 cleaners. Defeated monsters lie sprawled across the stone floor, surrounded by dark splatters from the recent battle. Soyeon stares forward, his eyes widening in absolute shock and distress. Signs for black restaurants and the 7th Avenue Modern Pub illuminate a building's exterior at night. Junwoo stands with his team on a city street at night where one of them insists on splitting the bill, telling Junwoo he spends too much money on them. Soyeon and Junwoo stand with their friends on a city street at night as one man offers to buy a round of drinks, insisting Junwoo must come along because he deserves it. Soyeon, Junwoo, Ah-hyung, Emma, and Yubin walk together on an outdoor path, discussing their dinner plans while feeling exhausted. Junwoo looks to the side with a resolute expression, stating that he is not coming. Junwoo, Soyeon, and 2 other men are startled by a loud thud, their expressions turning to shock and alarm. Junwoo looks off-panel, deciding there is no need to get friendly with the others, but then separates that thought from the practical matter of food. Junwoo stands with another man and stammers while ordering steak, then he turns to his companion, telling him not to worry. He explains he won't force drinks on him, stating it's better because he has less to feed. Soyeon looks away, hesitantly trying to correct what she just said. The man in the white shirt scratches his head, says he is leaving, and turns to walk away down the street, leaving Soyeon to watch his departure in confusion. Soyeon walks away down an urban street lined with shop signs, thinking it was good work today. Junwoo parts ways with his friends on a city street at night as one calls out a farewell to him. Junwoo stares silently to the side, his expression turning serious and contemplative. A vast city stretches out into the night, its buildings glowing under a cloudy sky. Junwoo lies on his bed with his hands clasped behind his head, thinking about his past life and who killed him. He rules out Park as the culprit, deciding he is too soft-hearted to hire an assassin solely out of resentment. Junwoo's expression is serious and contemplative as he deeply considers who else might hold a grudge against him. Junwoo thinks about Kwon Mo-yang, the newbie on his team he usually bullied, and Yoojin Min, his ex with whom he constantly quarreled, and finally Dong-Wei Hwang of the control team, a man he would rough up. Junwoo lies on his bed, looking frustrated as he says the list is far too long to count. Soyeon lies on his back in a messy room, staring upwards as he questions the point of his quest, concluding he probably doesn't even know his past life killer in this realm. Soyeon stares forward with a determined expression, resolving that for proper revenge she must deactivate the karma and return to her past life. He learns the condition for deactivating karma. He is to become the Secretary General of the International Superpower Association within 5 years, a task he acknowledges he must complete. Junwoo looks up with a frustrated expression, thinking he could be a hunter or join the control team if he had his skills, but then he pauses as an idea occurs to him. Junwoo commands the system open, causing a glowing blue translucent interface to appear over his body as it begins to load. Junwoo's eyes widen in apprehension as he remembers he didn't check something that morning. A system window lists skill requirements. Fallen Angel requires the average cleaner salary to exceed 60 million won. Limit Breaker requires a job competition ratio over 30,000 won. Omnipotence requires the job to be the most preferred career for young adults, and Yearbook requires a full-time conversion rate over 50%. The Demon Lord skills requirement cannot be verified. Soyeon stands confidently before a glowing holographic interface, examining the requirements to unlock new skills like cleaners and dungeon cleaners. The requirements for the cleaning team mandate an average salary for dungeon cleaners exceeding 45,931 and a job competition ratio greater than 30,000 won. Junwoo shouts in furious disbelief, his teeth bared and hands clenched as he yells that every single condition has to do with the cleaning team. Soyeon forcefully crushes a plastic bottle in her hand, the plastic crumpling under her intense grip. Soyeon leans over his desk, which is covered in crumpled papers, a bottle, and surrounded by overflowing trash bags, and yells, "You want me to become a fully committed cleaner, don't you?" Soyeon sits on the edge of a bed in a cluttered room filled with trash bags and lets out a deep sigh. A crumpled plastic bottle and several wads of paper lie discarded on the tiled floor next to a table and a person's leg in red and white attire. Junwoo clenches his jaw, and his eyes glow white as a system message announces the activation of his passive skill, OCD. Soyeon cleans the severely neglected room with a look of disgust, hauling heavy trash bags across the floor and wiping down filthy surfaces as he appears completely exhausted by the overwhelming task. Junwoo yells in frustration, his angry expression directed at the glowing blue digital interface in the background. System messages appear in response to a frustrated scream, announcing a skill unlock requirement has been met and revealing the condition is to show up at work. A system notification announces that the Hyper Boost skill has been unlocked. Soyeon sleeps against the bus window during his morning commute, drooling from the corner of his mouth. Junwoo sleeps on a crowded bus, his head resting on the shoulder of an annoyed woman as he reflects that he has been working as a dungeon cleaner for a week. Soyeon's eyes show intense determination as he states he has cleaned 25 dungeons to this day. Soyeon sits on the blood-splattered remains of a large monster pierced with swords, reflecting on the 6 bottles of disinfectants he used and the 30 monsters he disassembled as he questions how many skills he has unlocked. A notification declares that a skill requirement has been met. The skill was unlocked by the absurd condition of showing up at work one time. Soyeon clashes his glowing blade against Junu's, their weapons locking as he maintains a determined expression. Soyeon stands in his work uniform holding a broom, reflecting on how his battle-activated ability is useless for actual cleaning. Junu sighs in frustration, his expression annoyed as he grudgingly accepts the situation. A holographic interface details a series of skill unlock requirements. The Fallen Angel skill needs the average salary of dungeon cleaners to exceed 60 million won. Limit Breaker requires a job competition ratio over 30,000 won. Omnipotence demands dungeon cleaner become the most preferred career for young adults. The Yearbook skill requires a full-time employee conversion rate of over 50%, and the Demon Lord skill requirement cannot be verified. A final text box deems these conditions impossible for a dungeon cleaner. Soyeon stands at a window, looking down at the bustling city street filled with people. Junu and his team ride in a vehicle, their bodies slumped and their faces reflecting the deep exhaustion from their extreme job. Easier requirements also existed. Unlocking one counter required interest from the association leaders and the cleaning team, and unlocking Hellfire required a budget increase for the cleaning team. Junu looks forward with a serious and thoughtful expression. The Hunters Association headquarters, a modern glass skyscraper, stands against the bright sky. Junu stands in a meeting room and gestures at a large screen displaying a monstrous creature with glowing eyes. He tells the other men that with his knowledge as a former SSS rank hunter, he can provide them with a decade of advice to quickly grab their attention. Junu acknowledges their initial disbelief as one man at the conference table looks down in thought and the other looks away with a stern expression. Junu stands seriously in the middle of a group, wondering if he should reach out to his former teammates to gain their trust. Soyeon closes her eyes and furrows her brow, stating that there is no chance with a million hunters out there. Soyeon stands motionless with his broom in a large, bustling public area as anonymous figures walk all around him. Junu glares intently to the left, his expression serious. Junu shouts an alarm on the bus as the passenger next to him recoils, startled by the commotion. A city bus drives down a busy street as one person shouts about missing their stop and another tells them to keep it down. A glowing blue portal opens between 2 pillars on a city street as Junu asks why only 2 people are present and questions if the others are late. Junu stands with a slightly annoyed expression, while a smiling woman explains that the boss is getting more disinfectants and Huijong is taking personal time off. Junu stands by as a man complains about being 10 minutes behind schedule. Another man retorts that he is the one who is late, and a woman nearby explains she missed her stop. Soyeon's lips curl into a distinct smirk. Junu smirks confidently as he offers a can of coffee, telling the other person to drink it while they wait. Junu thinks about how Sang-hyuk's attitude has completely changed, guessing he is surprised that he has not quit yet. Soyeon questions Junu in an industrial corridor, demanding to know the reason for the delay and insisting they get a head start. Junu stands near an overpass with another man, his expression concerned as the man drinks from a cup. Junu states they are not done yet and the other man asks with what while taking a slurp from his drink. 3 men in uniform stand on a street, observing a large blue energy portal in the background while a cat walks between traffic cones in the foreground. Junu looks upward as blue energy emanates from his body. Soyeon stands within an unfamiliar dungeon surrounded by ruined city buildings and swirling blue energy, assessing that it can be no more than an intermediate blue-level dungeon. Swirling blue energy envelops the damaged city buildings as an unseen speaker questions the delay, stating the task should not be this challenging. A man looks down on a crouching Junu and a woman, calling them pathetic, while Junu looks back in confusion. Junu stands watching a glowing area of energy, thinking that he cannot assist them inside and that it should be done soon. A cat sits on a stone staircase and licks its paw. The preceding action now revealed to be a big miscalculation. Junu endures for 30 minutes, gritting his teeth and clenching his jaw with a strained expression. A man screams in a furious rage about the people inside, then suddenly yells that he sees them. Junu watches the outburst with a calm expression while Soyeon stands beside him, looking surprised. Soyeon steps confidently from a glowing portal, watching as an injured and exhausted Junu's party staggers out of the dungeon. She clicks her tongue, judging them as amateurs for struggling with a blue-level dungeon. Junu looks surprised as a woman raises a hand to his face, telling him to keep his voice down. Long, dark blue hair whips through the air, emitting a subtle glow. Soyeon's eye widens in alarm, his brow furrowing with sudden recognition. Yubin strides forward in a black suit with a sword at her hip, surrounded by a glowing blue aura. Soyeon recognizes the long, silky hair and pale, smooth skin, identifying the woman as Minju Kim. Junwoo stands beside Soyeon with a stern expression, stating she was a junior hunter on his team. Junwoo looks to the side with wide, shocked eyes, a bead of sweat running down his temple as he questions what she is doing here. Soyeon turns her head to look to the right, her golden eyes reflecting a curious and questioning expression. Junwoo confronts Soyeon with a tense expression, asking if she has something to say to him as she remains calm. Junwoo's expression shifts from disturbed refusal to intense frustration as he grits his teeth, questioning why it had to be her. Soyeon walks down an urban street, recalling her idea to contact her old teammates, but she decides one person is an exception. Junwoo speaks with an agitated and angry expression, declaring that the woman despised him for no reason. Soyeon's eyes widen as she remembers suggesting retirement to a severely injured person, recalling how harshly they cursed at her in response. Junwoo clutches his head in distress while a woman stands nearby looking upset, insisting he was only trying to be considerate. Junwoo stands with his arms crossed, watching the woman walk away and thinking her pride was all she had despite her potential. Soyeon and Junwoo look off to the side with surprised and concerned expressions as a faint blue light glows from behind them. Soyeon looks at him with a thoughtful expression and asks if he knows the other hunter, mentioning she noticed him staring blankly at her. Junwoo stands in profile against a bridge, looking upwards as he explains that he does not know the girl, she just resembled someone he knew. Soyeon speaks, her expression showing slight surprise and concern. A woman smiles confidently while Junwoo and another man react with shocked discomfort, one of them coughing after suggesting she was an ex-girlfriend. Junwoo arrives with a smile, announcing to the annoyed man and the laughing woman that everyone has gathered. Junwoo sits on the ground while another person leans down, asking him what's wrong. He looks away and claims nothing has happened as two others watch nearby. The man in the middle begins shouting, about to reveal a secret, when Junwoo urgently lunges and screams at him to keep his mouth shut. Junwoo shouts with a furious expression, a faint blue aura emanating from his body as he demands everyone stop talking and get to work. A tall, damaged building stands against a dark, debris-filled sky, the entire structure having transformed into a blue-level building dungeon. Soyeon, Junwoo, Emma, and Ah-young stand together in a desolate environment filled with defeated monsters and discarded weapons. Soyeon asks Junwoo if he has done research on this one. He replies that he has not, stating all he knows is that the boss is a humanoid monster. Junwoo wears a serious expression, thinking about the past week's bombardment of questions about dungeons and monsters. He believes his false excuse has successfully fooled them while three people converse casually in the background. Skeletal remains, scattered weapons, and bloodstains cover the floor of a ruined building dungeon. A voice instructs the team to search every corner and check for blood pools at the bottom of staircases, and the team confirms the order. An older man instructs Junwoo to come with him to the boss's room, and Junwoo agrees. A heavily damaged apartment building stands under a dark sky filled with debris. An older man covers his mouth in disgust, complaining that the humanoid looks exactly like a human corpse. Junwoo stands beside him, observing the scene with an intense, serious expression. The humanoid monster Vega lies injured on the ground amidst urban ruins, her female-appearing form covered in blood and her clothes tattered. Soyeon stands in the damaged room while Junwoo kneels, both observing Emma's unresponsive body on the floor. Soyeon says they don't need to dismantle this one. Junwoo agrees, stating it doesn't feel right. Junwoo turns his head with a concerned expression, asking if something is wrong. Junwoo looks forward with an unsettled expression, thinking to himself that something was off. Soyeon remembers that Vega wasn't a particularly threatening monster, recalling that dodging its nimble movements was all that was needed to defeat it. But she questions why the winged creature lunging at her now seems so different. Soyeon wields her glowing blue sword with a fierce expression, questioning how Minju Kim, a powerful B-rank hunter 10 years ago, could have struggled against such a weak opponent. Soyeon's face contorts in agony, her eyes glowing red as the stitches on her skin stretch with her pained expression. Emma leaps high above the cityscape, her swift sword movement creating radiating blue lines of energy. Emma stands with her back turned, enduring the chaotic impacts that streak red through the gray surroundings. A woman stares in fear at a winged demon as a man struggles to carry an injured woman. Soyeon watches them, lost in thought, until the man calls out, asking if he's just going to stand there all day. Soyeon apologizes, explaining he was distracted. Junwoo stands in a ruined location wearing an apron, his expression determined as he stares at a large, blood-stained object. He thinks to himself that none of it matters anymore, because she is now a stranger to him. Two large dark forms are covered in a dark liquid and red scratches. Soyeon's eyes widen in shock as a sharp pain shoots through her back, causing her to suddenly realize her injuries are knife wounds. Junwoo's face contorts in shock and distress, his eyes wide and his fist clenched as he processes the horrifying realization about Minju Kim. He yawns under the dark and cloudy night sky. Junwoo yawns widely at 5 a.m., tears welling in his eyes from the exhaustion of getting only 2 hours of sleep for the third consecutive day. Soyeon, Junwoo, and Emma observe a bright, swirling energy flash between two large columns as Junwoo complains about how busy he is and questions how long they have to wait. Junwoo stands before a brick building with another man, his face twisted in a frustrated grimace as he mutters about inconsiderate fools. Soyeon lets out a wide yawn, tears welling in his eyes from his exhaustion. Junwoo looks surprised as a partially visible female character asks him a question. Ahyun forces a wide smile, her eyes sunken with dark circles. Junwoo looks forward with a serious and stressed expression. Junwoo and two others in aprons look up at the dark sky, their expressions shifting from surprise to focus as they spot something approaching. Three silhouetted figures emerge from a brilliant swirling light as Junwoo and the other onlookers watch with impatient expressions, one complaining they were kept waiting for an hour. Junwoo's face twists in frustration, a sweat drop rolling down his temple as he reacts with exasperation. Soyeon stands surrounded by glowing energy with a sheathed sword at her hip and two figures visible in the background. She appears deep in thought with a serious expression, prompting the exasperated internal question of how, with a million hunters in dungeons, they keep bumping into each other. Junwoo and another swordsman confront two opponents on a street as a burst of blue energy erupts between them, halting the tense standoff. Junwoo takes a step forward, facing the female opponent who emanates a faint glow with a weapon hilt visible at her hip. A man takes a step forward into a luminous, ethereal space as Soyeon stands beside him, observing with a sheathed dagger. Emma and Soyeon face off in a close profile, glaring at each other with unyielding expressions as they grit their teeth. Junwoo clenches his jaw and glares past the sword-wielding woman as she walks away, internally cursing her for getting in his way. Soyeon wriggles, attempting to escape a hand touching her shoulder from behind. A blood-covered blade lies discarded on the dark, blood-soaked ground. Junwoo looks off to the side, internally questioning whether he should tell her. Junwoo sighs in frustration, his expression weary as he wonders what the use is. They shout, still not over what she said to them. Soyeon stands with his back to the viewer, facing Emma inside a bright hospital room where she sits calmly on the bed. Soyeon looks off-panel from her hospital bed, her expression filled with surprise and a slight concern. Junwoo looks up with a surprised and stern expression as his superior asks how he is feeling and demands a proper greeting. Junwoo stands over Soyeon in her hospital bed, clicking his tongue as he scolds her for neglecting her body so soon after surgery. Junwoo gestures while lecturing the other character, scolding them for an injury caused by overestimating their own strength and not resting. Soyeon, wearing a hospital gown, snaps back at Junwoo, telling him he could have said something sooner, and he glares at her, warning her about her tone. Soyeon stands with his back to Emma as she sits on a hospital bed. He sighs, insisting he is speaking to her out of care, not spite. A hand holds a slip of paper, the paper rustling in its grasp. Soyeon sits in her hospital bed, her face filled with shock as a hand presents her with an official retirement document. A hand holds the approval of retirement document for Minju Kim, confirming the entire association agrees with the decision. The paper lists her extensive service record, including the clearance of 23 S-Ranked, 45 A-Ranked, and 112 B-Ranked dungeons. It cites her injury as the official reason for retirement and is finalized with the signature of Junwoo Kim. Soyeon sits on a hospital bed, her eyes wide and intense as she clenches a document tightly in both hands. Junwoo, a bandage on his nose, speaks with a concerned expression, warning her not to strain herself and get injured even more. Soyeon stands with her back turned as her body trembles, insisting she is fine and reminding her boss why she needs to stay a hunter. A hand in a dark sleeve claps down onto a surface as the speaker declares the decision is final and demands obedience. Junwoo stands in the hospital room, speaking with concern to Soyeon, who sits silently in her bed. He tells her she should have said she was in pain, stating that hiding it only made matters worse. Soyeon looks to the side with wide, anxious eyes and quietly asks him to speak up. Soyeon, wearing a hospital gown, shouts at Junwoo, telling him she repeatedly said she needed to get checked. Soyeon yells at Junwoo, reminding him he said everyone gets sick and told her to get on with her work. Then she scoffs and asks if he thinks he is the only one in pain. Soyeon shouts, tears streaming from her eye. Junwoo leans in close and screams at the startled woman, his face contorted in a furious roar as he denies any blame. Junoo screams with a furious and exasperated expression, his mouth open wide revealing sharp teeth as he berates the other person for neglecting their injured shoulder. Soyeon stands beside the hospital bed as Emma hunches over in distress, insisting she is still capable and will recover with rehabilitation. Junoo looks forward with a serious expression, questioning who will cover for someone and what they can do with a useless shoulder, reminding them they are a swordsman before sarcastically suggesting they join the cleaning team. Junoo stares forward with a shocked expression, questioning the nonsense of being asked if he was ever considered a partner. Emma gives a bitter smile, apologizing for what she calls a stupid question and stating she was probably a disposable to him anyway. Junoo's eyes are wide with fury as a red aura radiates from him, and he yells that he never enjoyed the other person's company because they never took his orders seriously, asking if they think they can outsmart him now. Soyeon cries in a hospital gown, tears streaming down her face as she speaks with anguish. Junoo's face contorts with intense anger, his eyes wide and brows furrowed in a furious expression. Junoo slaps Soyeon across the face while she lies in her hospital bed, his expression sinister. Soyeon reels back from the impact, her eyes wide with shock as she raises a hand defensively. Soyeon glares forward, her expression a mix of rage and despair as tears stream down her face. Junoo looks down with a thoughtful expression, realizing he said hurtful things and remembering she tried to tell him about her injury. Junoo realizes he doesn't remember hearing about her problem, concluding he probably told her to suck it up without much thought. Soyeon walks with a serious expression, carrying her weapon as she passes an observer and approaches the caution barriers. Junoo has a troubled expression, acknowledging the situation is getting to him as a woman with a sword on her back stands in the background facing away. Junoo shouts from behind, causing Soyeon to turn around with a startled and questioning look. Junoo looks flustered, clutching his shirt as a voice stutters an order for him to strengthen his left grip. Soyeon shuts her eyes in disbelief, a bead of sweat running down her face from the shock. Soyeon states that relying on the right hand when holding a sword puts pressure on the shoulder. Soyeon grabs Junoo, her arm glowing with energy as she physically forces him into a combat posture, explaining that the stance will help him attack faster but will quickly wear out his shoulder. Junoo executes a powerful slash, using his left hand as support to disperse the balance of the weapon between both hands. Soyeon looks on with an unenthusiastic expression, her eyes slightly narrowed as she reluctantly agrees. Junoo's expression becomes stressed and embarrassed as he panics internally, convinced she now thinks he is babbling nonsense. Soyeon watches from the foreground and shouts dismissively as Junoo is forcefully thrown backward by a glowing energy. Soyeon watches with a confused expression, a drop of sweat trickling down her face as she questions what just happened. The large, modern structure of the National Medical Center stands under a partly cloudy sky. Soyeon sits in front of a window, smiling with his eyes closed and telling his listener they were lucky. Soyeon stares back in surprise and confusion, a bead of sweat forming on her temple. A doctor points to an X-ray of a right shoulder, indicating an area of inflammation. He explains the condition isn't serious but could have become a major injury if left untreated. A doctor in a lab coat sits at his desk across from a female patient, telling her he will prescribe medication but that she needs to improve her posture. The woman asks him what he means by that. Junoo tells Soyeon her overall balance is off and that she needs to strengthen her left grip, repeating the instruction with intensity as she looks back at him in complete surprise. Soyeon's eyes widen as she has an unsettling realization, remembering the creepy cleaner said the exact same thing. The sun rises over a modern school campus as birds fly across the sky. Junoo stands completely drained and defeated, begging to be killed. Soyeon looks at him from behind with a horrified expression while another man grins, satisfied with his team's work. Junoo confronts the man beside him with an agitated expression, yelling that he is doing it wrong and demanding to know what their next move is, while the other man looks back with exasperation. Soyeon stands in a city street, dressed in a suit and holding her katana. Soyeon's face is set with determination, while a man's face is contorted in shock and distress.